One fateful night, a woman was found dead under mysterious circumstances right inside her own home. The initial investigation seemed straightforward, but the deeper the authorities dug, the more complex the case became. Evidence began to contradict itself, making it nearly impossible to determine the culprit. However, as time passed, an unexpected breakthrough emerged. Now let's uncover how this case finally concluded. We'll follow the life of Katie Dahm, born on October 25, 1959, 66 years ago. From a young age, Katie was known as a cheerful, outgoing, and playful girl, just like any other child. At the age of 16, she began dating Mike, a schoolmate. Even though their relationship was still fresh, the two felt a special connection, believing they were meant for each other. They promised to marry after graduation and build a happy life together until old age. But fate didn't seem ready to smile on them just yet. Before finishing school, a major setback struck Mike. In his youthful curiosity and recklessness, he became involved with a group of friends who used and dealt in illegal substances. As a result, Mike was arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Surprisingly, thanks to good behavior and staying out of trouble during his sentence, he was granted early release after just 2 years. Despite his troubled past, Katie still loved and trusted Mike. She believed he had simply made youthful mistakes, and that after facing the consequences, he could change and become a good husband in the future. True to his word, not long after Mike's release, they got married. They went on to have 2 children, their eldest daughter Tasha and youngest son Sean, and settled down in the city of Harris, Texas. Katie's family fully supported Mike, helping him find a job so he could provide for his household. Katie, after becoming a mother, took on the role of full-time homemaker, caring for their children and running the household 24/7, rarely ever leaving the house. Their married life seemed smooth and happy, the kind of life many would dream of. But one day tragedy struck. It was March 3, 1987. At this time, both Mike and Katie were in their late 20s. As usual, Mike went to work. That afternoon, missing his wife and kids, he used a payphone to call home. Strangely, no one answered despite him calling dozens of times. This was unusual since Katie was almost always at home. Growing worried, Mike phoned Tim, a neighbor, asking him to check on Katie and the children in case something had gone wrong. Tim immediately rushed over and knocked on the door, calling out Katie's name for several minutes. There was no response. Circling around the house, he tried peeking through the windows and noticed the lights and TV were still on, as if someone was inside. Sensing something was wrong, Tim drove into town to alert the police, urging them to check the house quickly. When the officers arrived, they too knocked and called out but got no reply. Deciding to force entry, they were surprised to find the front door wasn't even locked. They simply turned the handle and stepped inside. The moment they entered the living room, they found Tasha, the eldest daughter, lying face down and unconscious on the sofa, a chilling sign that something terrible had taken place inside that home. Police immediately drew their weapons ready for any danger and carefully checked every corner of the house in case the perpetrator was still hiding inside. When they reached the second floor, they found little Sean, the youngest son, sleeping peacefully in his crib. However, when they opened Katie's bedroom door, they were met with a deeply unsettling scene. Her body was found lying face down on the bed. The bedsheet floor and even the walls were stained with blood. Her clothes were neatly folded near the bed. On Katie's body, officers observed multiple injuries, and evidence indicated the involvement of a male suspect. In addition, her ankles and wrists had been bound tightly with electrical cords from a bedside lamp. After thoroughly searching every corner of the house, police found no sign of the intruder. They quickly took both children to the hospital for medical care as Tasha's condition was critical. At that moment, Katie's father arrived at the scene. Officers immediately asked him to go to the hospital to stay with his grandchildren, fearing that the suspect might return to harm them. Not long after Mike returned home in a state of visible panic, sweating profusely. He hurriedly asked about his wife and children. At that moment, however, one officer noticed multiple reddish stains on Mike's clothes. Furthermore, after carefully inspecting the house, police found no signs of forced entry or struggle. This suggested that the perpetrator was likely someone very close to Katie, someone who could enter the house without resistance. Even in the bedroom where the incident occurred, there were no signs of a fight. Although the police did not yet have solid evidence to charge Mike, they strongly suspected him. Mike was taken to the station for further questioning and he fully cooperated. However, one detail made the police uneasy. On the night of the incident, Mike took longer than usual to drive home from work. He explained that he had stopped to visit a friend along the way. This seemed unusual. Why would a husband so worried that he had called a neighbor to check on his wife and children casually decide to visit a friend instead of rushing home? Based on these early details, one experienced investigator noted that he had seen similar cases before the culprit would commit the act, then leave the scene pretending to know nothing, and later ask someone else to discover the situation and contact the police. In such cases, the suspect would play the role of an innocent bystander. For this reason, the police decided to detain Mike temporarily and send his stained shirt for forensic testing. While waiting for the results, they also summoned Tim, the neighbor Mike had called that night, for further questioning. Tim had been the first person to arrive at the scene before the police. Another suspicious detail was that instead of calling to report the incident, Tim had driven several kilometers into the city to file the report in person. This was also highly unusual. When police searched Tim's car, they found small red stains on the floor of the vehicle similar to the marks found on Mike's clothing. Investigators began piecing these clues together and speculated that Mike and Tim might have conspired to commit the crime motivated by Katie's life insurance payout. A few days later, the official autopsy results were released. They revealed that Katie had died at around 1 p.m. on the same day, hours before police discovered her body at 6 p.m. During that time, both Mike and Tim insisted they had been at work, making it impossible for them to have harmed Katie. However, when police received word that little Tasha, Katie's eldest daughter, had survived her critical condition and regained consciousness, they immediately went to the hospital. She was the final key, the sole witness who might be able to identify the intruder who had entered the house that day. The young girl simply told police that she saw a man with blonde hair walk into the home. And after that, she remembered nothing else. The statement from 4-year-old Tasha left investigators even more puzzled, as both Mike and Tim had black hair. Furthermore, forensic lab results confirmed that the red stains on Mike's clothes were merely ink from his workplace. As for Tim, the red spots in his car turned out to be machine oil. Additionally, when both men were subjected to polygraph tests, neither showed any signs of deception. Interviews with their co-workers revealed consistent accounts at the time of the murder. Both Mike and Tim had been at their office, not anywhere else. At this point, both individuals had been cleared from the list of suspects. When the case seemed to reach a dead end, the police had to re-interview all members of Katie's family, hoping to uncover whether Katie had any enemies or unresolved conflicts in her past. Finally, after multiple interrogations, everyone in the family focused their suspicion on a single person, Greg Moe, Katie's brother-in-law. He was also close to Mike, and they often used drugs together when they were young. Greg himself had a criminal record and had served time in prison. Family members recounted that many times during gatherings, Greg would act overly flirtatious, say sweet things, and try to touch Katie inappropriately. Katie even complained to Mike that she didn't like Greg and felt very scared of him. Additionally, several other details pointed to Greg as the culprit. He had blonde hair, which perfectly matched the testimony of little Tasha, who told the police she saw a blonde-haired man break into the house. On the day of the incident, police also found Greg's fingerprints and hair in multiple locations inside Katie's house. However, Greg explained that this was normal because he often visited his 2 nieces and nephews. This excuse seemed plausible since besides Greg's fingerprints and hair, police also found fingerprints and hair from many other relatives throughout Katie's home. Another suspicious behavior of Greg was that on the night of the crime, he visited little Tasha, who was unconscious in the hospital at 3 a.m. Normally, no one visits family members in the middle of the night like that. It seemed he was trying to do something secretive at the hospital. Fortunately, the hospital did not allow him to visit that day. When police questioned Greg about his whereabouts and activities on the day of the crime, He stated that he woke up that morning and drove his wife to work around 10:30 a.m., then picked her up around 2:30 p.m. This means there was a 4-hour gap from 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., during which he could not provide clear evidence of his location. This time frame was more than enough for him to go to Katie's house and commit the crime. However, tests on bodily fluids and stains found on Katie's body could only determine that the perpetrator had blood type O. Although this matched Greg's blood type, statistics showed that over 55% of the population had blood type O at that time. This meant that with the technological limitations then, and all the initial evidence the police had, they still could not definitively identify the culprit. The case was subsequently classified as unsolved and gradually forgotten over time, as no further leads emerged. It was not until 15 years later in 1998, when medical technology and investigative applications advanced significantly, that police decided to revisit all unsolved cases, including Katie's, using modern technology. Initial forensic results showed that DNA from bodily fluids and items in Katie's room matched Greg's DNA by only 2%. This evidence was insufficient to charge him. Fortunately, the detective in charge did not give up. He sought out a DNA evidence analyst named Katie Long. At that time, Katie Long was researching and developing a new DNA testing method analyzing skin cells rather than relying solely on saliva or other bodily fluids as before. The police decided to try this new method on the electrical cord used by the perpetrator to bind Katie's hands and feet. This was a major stroke of luck because this cord was the only piece of evidence preserved in a paper bag. If it had been stored in a plastic bag, like other evidence, moisture buildup could have destroyed the skin cells on it, making testing by this method impossible. After testing the cord, the analysis revealed DNA from 2 people. One was Katie, and the other was her brother-in-law, Greg. The only way Greg's DNA could have appeared on the cord was if he was the perpetrator. Armed with this conclusive evidence, the police immediately arrested Greg, who had been living freely and happily for more than 15 years. With such clear proof, he had no choice but to surrender. During detention, Greg not only confessed to being the one who attacked Katie that day, but also revealed that he and Katie had secretly been involved in an affair for a long time, unknown to anyone in the family. He said he often took advantage of Mike's working hours to visit Katie at home and spend time with her. This is a one-sided testimony from Greg, making it difficult to verify its truthfulness, since Katie was no longer alive to refute or reveal the facts. Greg went on to say that on the day of the crime, he was under the influence of drugs. In that state, he drove to Katie's house. Katie, unsuspecting, opened the door to welcome her brother-in-law. However, on that day, Katie refused Greg's demands and tried to resist. To force Katie to comply, Greg threatened the 2 children sleeping in the house. With no other choice, Katie reluctantly agreed to his demands for the safety of her children. After everything was over, Greg drove away from Katie's house, secretly changed his clothes, and then went to pick up his wife from work, acting as if nothing had happened. By 2004, after a lengthy trial, the court sentenced Greg to 45 years in prison. However, after serving only 4 years, Greg died of illness at the age of 56. As for the family members, they found themselves unsure of what to do. On one hand, they felt relieved and happy that the police finally caught the perpetrator and brought justice for Katie. On the other hand, they were deeply saddened and disappointed that all these terrible things were caused by someone close to them, a family member they had never expected to commit such acts. Since then, everyone in Katie's family has lived in suspicion and estrangement from each other. They no longer gather, celebrate, or share meals together. Today's story ends here. If you enjoyed our content, please like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. For now, goodbye, and see you again.